Tonight, Winnipeg Police announced 5 charges against a suspect in last weekend's shootings.
We have a sewing pattern program happening in 2 weeks, and so it's really exciting.
A new wellness hub opens in Iqaluit.
I'm just like everybody else. I used to be a radio personality, so I worked on radio for over 10 years. Then I went into food security. I started a couple orchards to help there.
And a new podcast by journalist Kathleen Martins tackles homelessness in Winnipeg. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. We begin tonight with an arrest by Winnipeg Police on the 4-person homicide that happened last weekend in the city. Sav Jones reports from the scene.
An arrest has been made in a 4-person homicide that took place in Winnipeg on Sunday.
Late last night, a warrant of arrest was issued for Jamie Randy Felix, 32 years, of Winnipeg, Manitoba.
Jamie Randy Felix, age 32, was taken into police custody early this morning. He is charged with 4 counts of second-degree murder and 1 count of attempt to commit murder. The deceased victims in the shooting are Crystal Beardy, Stephanie Beardy, Melalik Lasickle, and Dylan Lavalley. Another 55-year-old male remains in hospital in very critical condition. Felix is a member of Barons River First Nation. He is well known in Winnipeg as a model and actor. His twin brother Jonathan was murdered in 2012 in Winnipeg. Police say it's too early in the investigation to know what motivated the killings. Felix was known to police. He was on a court release, but police wouldn't say what for. There are no other suspects at this time, but police believe there may be more people connected to the murders. They are continuing their investigation and are executing a number of search warrants. Sav Jones, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
None of the charges against Jamie Randy Felix have been proven in court. We always want to hear what you think about this or any other story. Here's how to continue the conversation. If you have a story you want to share, you can send us an email to news@aptn.ca. To read and watch our stories, you can go to our website, aptnnews.ca. You can also find us online on media sites including TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. A new Inuit-centred wellness hub opened in the capital of Nunavut this week, bringing much-needed space for families and organizations who need it. Trevor Wright brings us more.
This week, the Iqaluit Health Research Centre held its grand opening for its new Inuit-centred Community Wellness Hub, a new non-profit space which holds daycare rooms, training areas, a community kitchen, a drum space, a library, and offices. It's the culmination of over 7 years of work. Inuit-centred means a place for life, and according to officials, it's already quite lively.
The daycare is moving in next week, but we've already had courses happening in our training center upstairs. Last week we delivered a course for family violence shelter workers, and next week we have students coming in to do sealskin preparation and courses for researchers, so it's already busy every day. We have a sewing pattern program happening in 2 weeks, and so it's really exciting.
Trevor Wright, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
Meanwhile, a new nationwide mental health crisis hotline has launched. People in every province and territory will be able to call or text 988 to access mental health and suicide prevention support. Those who need support will be connected with a trained responder, with most calls or texts being answered by someone living in the same region. The program runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all free of charge. It's expected the hotline will receive between 600,000 and 700,000 calls in the first year. There are 9 official Indigenous languages in the Northwest Territories, all of which need support. But one program is showing promising results. Charlotte Moore Jacobs has more.
Cynthia Pavlovich incorporates Dinji Jajinjik in her everyday life as much as she can. But it wasn't always this way. An intergenerational residential school survivor, she grew up without her language and away from her traditional territory in the Beaufort Delta. But Pavlovich is determined. She meets with the Dingijunjinjik speaker virtually 5 days a week, completing 200 hours of learning through the Northwest Territories Mentorship Apprenticeship Program.
I get to choose what kind of things that I want to learn, and then she just kind of helps me. So sometimes we're making labels for around the house. Sometimes we're translating poems. Sometimes I just ask her questions about what it was like to grow up there, or what was the differences, or how would it be if we went for a walk. Stove or oven. Stove, in it we roast. Itzi is the word for stove. In it we roast.
Her goal is to become fluent enough to pass on the language to her 3 sons.
Very interesting to see how they have different words for families, different words, like there's not a lot of negative, like there's no words for calling someone stupid.
The program started in 2019 and has since nearly doubled from around 30 pairs of mentors and apprentices to nearly 60 this past year. Shauna Coleman works for the Territories Language Department. She wants in on the program too. She is going to sign up to learn Chipewyan.
In there, I would say early adults that are interested in wanting to reclaim their languages and recognizing that maybe their family members are passing or their community members with the knowledge of language are passing. So they want to harness that and want to get that knowledge before that happens. So there's definitely that, and we have folks that are, they call it sleeping language. So they're older folks that are like, yeah, it's there because I can understand an elder, I know what they're saying, but I don't know how to speak it.
According to NWT 2021 Bureau of Statistics, most Indigenous language speakers are 45 years and older.
Paul Boucher, who say it, to Deschart Dina, Kuja Tapachanaster.
Paul Boucher is a traditional knowledge instructor and teaches Chipewyan at the high school in Fort Smith.
1.85% of the population of Fort Smith speak Chipewyan. When I was here, when I came in 2015, there was a lot more people speaking the language. Right now, I could count maybe 25 people.
In addition to what's taught in the classroom, Boucher says more has to be done to use the language outside of the school in the community. Pavlovich can stay in the mentorship program up to 3 years.
In seeing how it's been so healing and so rewarding, I really wish that it was something that was able to be shared with everybody and anybody.
In the meantime, she's already planning to pass on her knowledge and began writing a book in the language for children back home in the Beaufort Delta. Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Time for a quick break. Coming up, our Truth and Politics panel weighs in on the solidarity many Indigenous peoples share with Palestinians. Stick around. Welcome back. This week, our Truth and Politics panel tackles the relationship some Indigenous peoples have to the Israel-Palestine conflict. Since early October, the war has dominated the headlines. And as a fragile ceasefire comes to an end, Nigan Sinclair and Carrie Benjo weigh in. Nigan, let's start with you. Why do you think so many Indigenous people share solidarity with the Palestinian people?
It's a very complicated situation. It's something that is ultimately a battle about indigeneity. Israel, according to the Bible, has a holy, sacred relationship with the space. I don't think anyone argues that. I think that generally it's true that Jewish people have a very unique and close tie with the lands that are now occupied in Israel. The fact is, though, that within the very Bible itself, it talks about another strand of people that came from Noah and that is the Palestinian people, Islamic people. And so they both have an indigenous claim to the area. Israel, however, disputes that claim, says that Arabians or Islamic people migrated to the space. We're not here to debate about indigeneity, but the problem is that the world has made a decision. And so the biggest backers to Israel are the United States. And of course, we know the track record of the United States in the treatment of indigenous peoples on this side of the world. And it's highly ironic that the United States is going and supporting the indigenous claims of another nation on another side of the world, while undermining our sovereignty, undermining our rights, continuing to occupy our lands and treat us like second-tier citizens. And Canada has very much followed the lead of the United States. And so that's the challenge here. And when writing about it for Indigenous peoples, it's a very tricky issue because we get into this kind of debate around indigeneity, what constitutes indigeneity, what constitutes occupation and colonization. And so we can certainly see that when Indigenous peoples wade into this debate, we often come on the side of Palestinians because we know oppression, we know marginalization, but we also get into this very tricky situation around the long history in the Middle East of displacing people, the reestablishment of the Israel homeland, and then all, of course, the atrocities that happened as a result of their claims, the competing claims of indigeneity, which leads to the massacre on October 7th by Hamas and the ongoing now struggle or attacks by Israel on the West Bank, on Gaza, and etc. And so it's very difficult.
Carrie, we recently saw Wanda Nanabush, the Indigenous curator, depart the Art Gallery of Ontario following some complaints about her social media posts in support of Palestine. What are your thoughts on that?
I think artists are in a very unique position. They don't operate in the same spaces like as a 9-to-5, like someone like working in media, 9-to-5 job. And we have parameters. Artists are allowed to be free thinkers. That's their whole thing. You know, they get to expand and present ideas that maybe conflict with everybody else's, and they want people to think of things in a whole new way. And so I understand where she's coming from and whatever, and that's just the thing with artists. They operate in a very different place than us, but when they're in a gallery and stuff like that, there are rules and regulations that they have to follow. And so I think there was just a conflict maybe that happened. I'm not sure exactly why she departed, whether or not it was on her own terms or she was asked to leave. I don't know that, but I can see if there's like different viewpoints and they're butting heads. I can see somebody just like saying, okay, well, this is not the space for me. This is not the space that I want to be in, and leaving. Or, you know, it could be the other way around. So I really don't know what happened there, but artists in general, they're the thinkers. They're the ones that get to present these really broad ideas that maybe we just kind of think about, but they express it in such a way that make us start to question, start to think. And I think she is just doing what she does. She's being an artist. She's being a free thinker, and that's what artists do.
Nigan, just quickly, your thoughts on that?
This is about money. Carrie's right. It absolutely would be an untenable situation from Wanda's comments. I know Wanda well. I have deep respect, and you know, there's nobody that thinks more deeply about what they say, both professionally in spaces, also on social media. So Wanda's positions on Palestine are very sound. I mean, look to see what she had said, but they certainly disrupted relationships with the AGO, with the Art Gallery of Ontario. It would be very difficult, I think, for the Art Gallery of Ontario, who have a great deal of financial backing from those who wrote a letter to say, we don't appreciate these comments around the situation in the Middle East. And so this is really about funders who felt very uncomfortable by what should have been, as Carrie points out, a moment of free speech. You know, you don't get to just cherry pick what artists have to say when you invest in art. You have to accept that artists have opinions, ideas. That's the whole reason we have art in the first place. And so Carrie's point is 100% the position that I would say to these financial backers who have deep discomfort with what Wanda Nanabush has to say. And of course, all of this is allegations. The AGO is not talking. Wanda's probably under a non-disclosure agreement. But it absolutely all points to the idea that this is all about money, people who threatened to withdraw funding from the AGO and certainly created an uncomfortable situation there. But we have to remember, artists have a right to say what they want. That's why you hire them.
Carrie Negon, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, miigwech.
You can watch all of our Truth in Politics panels over on our APTN News YouTube page. Time to step aside for one more quick break. Coming up, we'll hear from the people on the streets of Winnipeg who are homeless in a new podcast by Kathleen Martins.
I'm just like everybody else. I used to be a radio personality, so I worked on radio for over 10 years. Then I went into food security. I started a couple orchards to help there.
Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. This was texted to us from a viewer in Iqaluit, located in the far northwestern corner of the NWT mainland. Stunning sunset behind the Richardson Mountains. Thanks for all the photos that are sent in. If you have a great photo, send it to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the east coast, 7 above in Halifax, +5 in Charlottetown. -12 for Kuujjuaq, 9 below in Nain. +2 in Montreal, 4 below in Val-d'Or. +1 for Sault Ste. Marie, 0 in North Bay. -1 in Thunder Bay, 3 below in Sioux Lookout. -7 with snow in God's Lake, -3 for Norway House. -1 in Winnipeg, -2 for Dauphin. -1 in Regina, 4 below for Saskatoon. -5 and sunny for Meadow Lake, 6 below for La Ronge. In northern Alberta, -11 and cloudy for Fort Chip, 9 below in Fort Mac. -2 in Edmonton, +2 for Lethbridge. 8 above in Vancouver, +9 for Victoria. +1 with snow in Prince George, flurries and 0 for Smithers. -19 with snow in Old Crow, 12 below in Whitehorse. -18 with snow for Yellowknife, 22 below in Norman Wells. -11 and snow in Sachs Harbor, 12 below with snow in Pawlatuck. -5 for Chesterfield, 8 below in Arviat. -2 in Resolute, 3 below in Arctic Bay. Well, some more weather news here. Inuit who only speak in Inuktitut language now have more options to keep updated on the weather, which can often be essential knowledge before heading out onto the land. The Weather Network has teamed up with Iqaluit TV and Inuktitut satellite channel to help deliver daily weather reports in various Inuktitut regional dialects. It will consist of 4 3-minute broadcasts 16 times a day. According to the network, these reports will include regions from across the Arctic, such as Nunavik, Inuktitut, as well as Nunavut's Kivalliq and Qikiqtaaluk regions. Well, they're often called beggars, drunks, or bums. But these people you see on the streets have names, families, and stories. These are the first few lines of a new podcast by APTN News. The podcast is called Our Relatives, and it premieres today. Online journalist Kathleen Martins and social media editor Jesse Andrushko spent a month walking the streets to meet the people who have no safe place to go. Here's a part of that podcast. Kathleen, thanks for being with us here. Before we get into the details of the podcast, can you tell us how this came about?
For sure. So it was during the pandemic, Dennis, and I noticed the bus shelters were full. And I know they were full of homeless people. There was furniture in there were clotheslines, there were mattresses. Someone had cut out some carpeting, so there was wall-to-wall carpeting in one of them. One time I went up to one and city staff, I guess transit staff, were cleaning out furniture, dishes, food containers, and also human waste. So it was seeing that as a reporter, I realized that I needed to know more, and I wanted to investigate not only why they were in bus shelters, but who they were.
So when did you start talking to people?
I started in September, going out to bus shelters, and then from there the story just sort of expanded. You know, once I go and one day I hit up 4 bus shelters and people said, yeah, now you should go to this food bank, and then you need to go to that actual homeless shelter, and then you need to go to this street and talk to these people. And it all just was very organic, one after the other. So September, October, November, spent days and evenings out in parks, alleys, at homeless shelters, talking to homeless and people on the street.
So we're going to play a segment of episode 1. Can you set up what we're about to hear?
For sure, yeah. This is a woman named Catherine, and I met her at Inuktitut. That's the Indigenous-led shelter, the latest one. We've got 4 in Winnipeg, and she's been living on the street for about a year. And it was karaoke night at Inuktitut, which is pretty unusual, and she had a great voice. And afterwards, she did an interview with us.
How come you're here tonight at the shelter?
Well, I'm just like everybody else. I used to be a radio personality, so I worked on radio for over 10 years. Then I went into food security. I started a couple orchards to help there, and everyone in their life encounters barriers, roadblocks that we put up ourselves sometimes. It could be addiction, it could be mourning, it could be separation, and I suffered all 3. And so I found myself in a situation where I had nowhere to turn, and luckily, the shelters and people that are at the shelters, they've helped me. So I'm just trying to find myself again, I guess.
Feel like a pretty common story actually there. Kathleen, after all this time that you've spent on the streets, what did you learn from the people you met?
Well, every second person I spoke to was from a First Nation, and that was completely random, just running into them, and that was very telling. And they shared everything from they moved to the city because the house they were living in was moldy and their children were getting sick, to they were a single person and they would never get a home for themselves on their First Nation, and so they moved to Winnipeg, where they were living on welfare in a very tiny room in a crappy hotel on Main Street. So a lot of this was people with issues from their home communities coming for a better life to Winnipeg.
Well, important work, Kathleen. Looking forward to listening to it all, and podcast probably the only way to tell a story like this, or one of the only ways. So looking forward to it, and thanks for talking to us about it.
Thank you so much, Dennis.
And you can find the Our Relatives podcast at aptnnews.ca/podcast, or wherever you download your podcasts. That's going to do it for us here tonight. Fond farewell to Holly Moore. I'm Dennis Ward. We'll see you next week.